Welcome to this week's CTO Studio. Today is a Tuesday, and we are going to talk to Jessica Sweeney about product management, the intricate relationships between CTOs and their products and their managers, when to hire a product manager, and when to go sailing.
I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see. It looks something like this.
Welcome to the CTO Studio. I'm your host, Etienne de Bruin. The CTO Studio is where we chat with CTOs building amazing products with incredible teams. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? So Jessica Sweeney, welcome to the CTO Studio.
Thank you.
And let the record show that you brought in not only quail eggs, but peeled quail eggs.
They are a pain to peel, so I wanted to be nice to you guys.
Do you have to have tiny fingers?
No, you have to just make a mess. Am I setting a record for speechlessness so early in the podcast?
You know, one way I peel my eggs is to put them into ice cold water after they're boiled.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that make it easier though?
It makes it easier to get the membrane off, but with quail eggs, the outside, the shell part, shatters into tiny little pieces. It doesn't stay
so that's
whole
the mess.
like a
So you can't just kind of...
No. That's good for the podcast listeners. For those of you without video, that scooping motion that you did was.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So do you have little quails in your backyard?
I do. I
Are
have
you kidding
4
me?
quail hens.
What does it look? What does a quail look like?
Well, they're adorable and they're tiny and they're really stupid. They're deeply stupid animals.
Do
but
they also
produce eggs
roost?
for me. They're wonderful.
Do they also roost?
They don't. I wanted originally to free range them. They could run around and be adorable in my garden, and it turns out no, they don't know to come home, so they don't roost. They're ground nesters. They do really well in a cage.
And they don't fly.
I made them a nice cage.
With your bare hands.
Well, I did actually build them one, but it didn't work very well. So then I bought one.
And do they fly?
Yes, they do this thing called flushing, which is when they're startled, which is every time I walk by, literally every time. And all I ever do is give them food. They are frightened of me. And they flush, which is when they fly straight up in the air. And if their cage is too big, this is how deeply stupid they are. They will break their necks on the top of the cage.
Now, I mean, isn't that sad? It's not really stupidity. It's mostly sadness.
Well, I do feel sorry for them.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
And then it's like my rooster that crows every time I pass, regardless of what time of day.
Just saying hi.
Just saying hi.
Yeah, there you go.
So anyways, welcome to the CTO Studio.
It's good we got right into it in the first 5 minutes.
I did tell Jessica that we have to come in with a high punch, solid topic.
Yeah, I feel like we did.
And I think we nailed it.
I mean, the quail eggs are really pretty. That's a good reason to go to YouTube.
I'm going to have to go through this whole episode wondering how they taste.
You can have
If
one.
while you're giving me an answer on some thoughtful question, I do sit back and chew one, would you be offended?
No, that's why I brought them. There's one
Okay.
for Eric. There's one for
Great.
Kristen.
Eric,
Yeah.
you going to try
I
one?
brought enough for the whole class to share.
So one thing I love about doing the CTO Studio is I don't really want it to be a self-indulgent conversation between two CTOs that just it's kind of like when bands go on a stage and they jam with their backs to the audience. I'm just like, well, what are you doing? It's really cool that you're having a moment, but I paid my $35 to be here, so you entertain me, not yourselves. And I feel with some CTO style podcasts, and nothing against that, I feel like my audience needs to hear from everybody in different disciplines and different takes, and the more, pluralistic those views are as far as our business and personal and quail eggs, that's what I want it to be about. So you and I have a long history, like 2 weeks.
Yeah, days and days.
10 days.
It's great.
And I think within 6 minutes I said you need to be on the CTO Studio, or was it 10 minutes?
You did. It was one of the first things you said. We got to get you in
And
here.
basically it was when we had a meeting about product managers and products that you went straight to the whiteboard and you drew this amazing thing on the whiteboard for me. And I thought that. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about what you drew on the whiteboard, if you can remember?
I can manage.
And just kind of, without any visual aid, just kind of walk us through what that model was and sort of how it's applied to product management.
Yeah, I'll try and draw a visual picture for the listeners. So when we talk about product management, one of the challenges is that a lot of people mean very different things by that title. There's not a lot of consistency.
It's kind of like with CTOs. People are, well, what is a CTO? And with product management, I think a lot of us are asking, okay, exactly what is the product management role?
Right. And one of the reasons for that is that product managers are very often the gap fillers. They're the glue that hold all of the different departments together. And that was how it was originally conceived when you go back to the original Procter & Gamble brand man decades ago. It was the person who coordinated all the different departments. And so today in tech, we have the same idea of a product manager bringing together lots of different stakeholders to make the product successful. But as a gap filler, that often means that an individual product manager will stretch to fill whatever gap exists in that different company. And every company has different gaps. So if you've got a really strong engineering team, maybe the product manager is less focused on engineering and more focused on design. If you've got a great design team, I've worked at a company that had a fantastic UX lab. I did very little design work as a product manager. So one way to conceive of a product management job is as a hub and spoke. And this is a pretty common analogy that we use to understand roles that are about coordination. So if we put the product manager at the center of this hub and all of the other departments that are involved in the success of the product as the outside of the rim, then we can imagine how far out to that edge does the product manager stretch, and how, there you go, hold it up for the people on YouTube. Again, it's great to have that visual.
Thank you.
Then we can sort of see that we can map as a sort of amoeba the different ways in which the product manager is filling these different gaps.
Now, unfortunately, gaps are like the loudest thing in terms of you don't see what you've done or what you have, but you see what's missing. And does it mean that a product manager has to be good at literally doing those things, or be able to mobilize people to get those functions fulfilled?
It's both, and it depends on the company. So the best product management answer anyone can give is it depends. The answer is it depends.
CTOs do the same thing.
Yeah, we're great. That's why we have so much in common. We often are overlapping each other, CTOs and heads of product, because we're looking at all of the different ways that we need to have the product be successful. And so much of that is focused on building it. I think that when it comes to the question of doing or coordinating, it's what resources do you have? Certainly in a startup organization or in an intrapreneur startup team within a larger company, product managers are called upon to do everything without a lot of resources as a way of proving that they can be successful to justify getting those resources. But then in larger organizations, it's very much about keeping everybody pointed at the same goal, making sure that everyone understands the context of what they're trying to achieve. And my personal style is one in which I don't want to tell people how to do what they need to do, but I want to make sure that everybody understands the outcome that we're trying to get to. And I think that's the key role of a product manager when we differentiate from all of the other folks who are involved in leadership to achieve a successful product. I want to see a product manager making sure that we are building towards the right outcome, and everybody else has their area of expertise where they know the best way to achieve that outcome.
So do you, just to riff on that a bit, do you want everybody on the team to have empathy for the product, understand the customer, bleed the product, or do you want everyone to just STFU and just focus on what they're supposed to do for efficiency's sake? I don't mean, surely you have to care, but some engineers, for instance, want to code a piece of code and they don't give a shit whether it's going to make a customer happy. They just want to, some logo designers or graphic designers or, ad campaigns. Yes, there is the customer, the empathy for the customer, but in the end, there's also this technicality that you just have to execute.
So I think I disagree with the idea that empathy is on the opposite side of efficiency, because a developer has to make 1,000 minute decisions about how to build what they're trying to build. And we can station a product owner or a product manager or a voice of the customer over their shoulder, answering every question about the market and the product we're trying to build for it. If we can simply start at the beginning to give the context that the developer needs to understand more clearly what we're trying to achieve and who we're trying to achieve it for, very often the answers to those thousands of questions that come up in the process of building become obvious to that expert.
And I would challenge the fact that it gets obvious because, and I speak from when I ran my company, I tried to adopt something called open allocation, which really meant that projects would compete for developers as opposed to developers competing to take projects. And so projects were written in a way that was customer centric. And if we do this, then the outcome will be that. And what I found was it was exhausting for the devs in a sense because it wasn't so clear for them what the priorities were. And I think personality-wise and maybe personality type, it's maybe a little harder for an analytical person to say, well, if I understand what the customer wants, I now know which of my tasks have, more gravitas.
I agree with you that obvious doesn't apply to every decision. I'm thinking of lower level decisions. So do I need to write a product that adheres to a certain spec? That's probably in the statement of work that they're working against. That's in the user story maybe. But then the little things about, do I go this direction or do I go that direction? Do I include it in this way or do I include it in that way? Those are the sort of smaller things that don't get raised to the level of write it in the spec or put it in the story.
So it's kind of like you want your team to have sort of what would the customer want moment in those those daily sort of decisions around the things that you said that aren't visible at the statement of work level.
That's right. And we've tried in the past to do huge specifications, volumes of pages that got every level of detail. And we know it just doesn't work. By the time you're done writing a document like that, it's out of date. So Agile is in part about giving that kind of context to developers. I'll say the other thing about product management and developers is that I've worked with teams that have shipped products that no one bought, not one person. And that was really hard for the engineers. And the commitment that I made to them was that product management is really about making sure that the products they build are things that people want to use. And they found that more energizing, knowing that they were working towards an outcome that would have a real impact.
So can you maybe highlight what have been good relationships with technology teams and what have been more contentious? What works, what doesn't work? And maybe also in the context of a CTOs that you've worked with, what tends to set you up for success and what are early warning signs that this isn't going to be great?
I think assumptions are what trip everybody up. And we see this because, in particular, product management is defined so differently at the major influencing companies in our industry. So in software, we see that Microsoft has a completely different definition and approach to product management than Facebook or Google or Apple or Amazon. they all take a different approach. And there's a great book that spends a whole chapter on this, Gayle, Laakman, McDowell's Cracking the PM Interview is the name of the book. And it's all about interviewing, and I read it as a hiring manager to see what people were being told. There's this wonderful chapter where she really goes into detail about these different companies. And what happens is that people make assumptions about product management based upon the company that they're most familiar with. So if you know how Facebook does product management, then you know that PMs write code. And if you know how Amazon does product management, you know that PMs have MBAs and they work on strategy. And if you come into the relationship as a CTO and a PM with different assumptions about what the role is, you have a lot of conflict. So having a way to clarify that, having a framework or a model, or even just a common reference point can help to open the conversation about what is it exactly that you expect to bring to this relationship. What should I be expecting from you?
Very. I can think of a couple relationships that have gone awry in the sense that I think it's because you share a common taxonomy around. You understand the words that you're saying because you both live in that world. Customer acquisition, keep things simple, don't make the user think, pixel this and but I do think that even though you're speaking the same language, you are coming at these things from different experiences. And I've recently had a thought that in working with a PM that we should just write down what our expectations are of the roles that we're in, so that we can actually compare those notes and say, oh, okay, I realize now that you don't care about these things, but every time you speak, I think you care about these minutiae. And she's like, no, well, I don't care about that. So I think maybe the fact that we overlap in the language we use, which comes from overlapping in the domains that we are.
And we often have different values. There are lots of cases where engineers are very concerned with how something is built. And they are really focused on using elegant technology, perhaps, or some people are really interested in using the latest technology. And there are cases where the product manager's job is not to be concerned about how something is built, but maybe that product manager is more focused on who's going to buy it or making sure that it ships on time because there are external constraints we're trying to fit into. So there are cases where people's jobs are to worry about different things. And we see conflicts between those totally valid different values. So recognizing that different people are supposed to be looking after different aspects of the job and having respect for those things that the person is tasked with looking after goes a long way towards building empathy and coming to a common understanding.
So do you think first conversation with a new PM is, hey, what are our values? What are our truths? What guides our decision making, and kind of a get to know you session like that? Or is that maybe too explicit?
I think it's useful. I don't see a problem with being explicit. We'd talk about these things. There's nothing embarrassing or wrong about surfacing these issues and acknowledging that things that are important to me might not be important to you, but we both have to look after the things that are important for this product to be successful.
Do you view the CTO / engineering lead and their team as code monkeys to just do what you want them to do?
I feel like the right answer to that in this podcast is a definite no.
I almost got her. I was going to strategically put a quail egg in my mouth so to distract you to get the truth.
I think that actually was the truth.
Do you think that is a problem that PMs have? So let's talk about good PMs and bad PMs. Not as a morality thing, but more as maybe an efficiency thing.
Are you asking me to say bad things about my tribe?
I am.
I will say
areas
bad
of growth
things about myself.
Okay,
I have made mistakes.
Let's do, and so have I. So let's talk about, you see a junior PM, super excited about their role. passionate about the domain, the problem they want to solve. What are some of the common mistakes that they make? So assumptions is a great one. I think that is a really overarching saboteur. But what are the other things that you see in junior PMs make?
So there is a common saying within tech that the product manager is the CEO of the product. And I think that causes more problems. Can
we pause for effect there? Or is that going to be weird on a podcast?
Dun, dun, dun.
Maybe some background music or...
Can we get a round of applause?
Yes, put in some applause there, Eric.
I'll give you a quail egg.
Yes, and that's a term I've used many, many times as well.
I think it's wrong.
Great.
I think
Tell me
it's
about
straight
that.
up wrong. Because the essence of product management is influence without authority. We're like the reverse Spider-Man. With great responsibility comes no power.
So, you mean with
okay, you know
so
Spider-Man, right?
What's the real phrase?
With great power comes responsibility.
Okay.
Or great responsibility,
Yes.
I think.
But you're saying
That's Uncle Ben,
okay.
not the rice one, the Spider-Man
I'm
one.
into Superman, not Spider-Man.
I'm sorry.
Which I had to talk to my son about it because he's into Spider-Man.
I like your son. He sounds cool.
We've lost a whole rich part of our history because of that. What we could have had as a father and son. You win some, you lose some, right?
Yeah, like a son. That's good.
Influence without authority.
Influence without authority, which is the name of a book that's been around for a while.
Okay.
So
Tell me about that a bit.
So
meaning that the CEO can come in and pull rank. People are generally hold them in a certain esteem.
Or her,
sorry. And when the PM comes along, there's this sort of, it's just the PM.
in some cases, and when I think about a junior PM who really buys into that CEO of the product business, or, I'm responsible for ensuring the success of this launch, there tends to be the assumption, again, we always come back to assumptions, that everybody should just do what I say because I'm responsible. And it just doesn't work that way. And that's where I see the relationship sour, because engineers are experts at what they are experts at. And trying to tell people to do things a certain way just because you said so doesn't work. It doesn't work. And that's not how people are wired anyway, no matter who they are.
So are you saying a junior PM would sometimes come in and, like what you just said, hey, because I'm responsible and have been placed the mantle of the success of this product, you should all do as I say?
Yes.
Okay.
And that also mostly manifests itself in a lot of timeline issues. So when we talk about the responsibilities of a PM, I really buy into the idea that a PM is responsible for what needs to be built, but the engineering team must be responsible for the estimate of how long it will take to build it. So if you come back to me as a CTO or a head of engineering and say, this is the timeline for what you've asked for, I don't get to say, build the same thing faster. All I get to do is decide on the priorities. So the engineers get total control over timeline and estimation, and the product managers get to then prioritize what can be done within that time frame.
Is there so what do you think the product manager should have executive authority over?
Oh, well, everything. I mean, is this if I could remake the world in my image?
No,
yeah.
So if you gave me an example now of what a PM shouldn't the domain they should not try and control, which is the when and the estimates. But what should we as CTOs say? You know what? As denting as this might be to the ego or to your whatever role you're in, this is really what the PM, you should take heed at sort of this. Could come across again as an authoritarian statement, but really it's just the PM doing their job.
That really comes down to issues of what to build. And where I've seen dysfunctional relationships, it was where the product team was setting priorities based on lots of external business issues, partnerships, market strategy, feedback from customers, and the engineers really wanted to work on the cool thing they wanted to work on. So when it comes to prioritizing what to build and how to allocate resources to build those things, I like the idea of having engineering side projects and skunkworks in organizations that have the capacity for real research and development to do something new as enabling technologies. But when it comes to the core development priorities, those have to be led by the market. And we talk about the evolution of a company when you have a very technical founder. It's often the case that you start with a cool thing that technical founder has made. And that cool thing is very often a solution in search of a market,
or
solution in search of a problem.
Or the idea that birthed a company.
That's right. And that's often a thing you made. So we have then an engineering-led organization where we made a thing, the engineering team is cool, now we just want people to use it or buy it. As the company evolves, they realize very quickly that they need people to give them money for that thing. And they bring in a sales team and they tell the sales team, here's the thing we made, go forth and get money for it. And you end up with the sales team coming back and saying, well, this is what I need in order to bring money in. And so we then get a sales-led organization, which is where the sales team is calling the shots and saying, if you build this, I can get the customer to sign a contract and
Those
give us
are
a
words
check.
that we love, by the way.
Which ones?
If we build this, we will make more money.
That's true.
CTOs love that.
Well, you're making air quotes with your finger,
Yes.
which makes me think
Which
that
means CTOs hate that.
it is really easy for a company to get stuck in a sales first mentality because it pays everybody's paychecks. And it is so immediate and urgent that we can consume all of a company's resources just building what the next customer needs to get that purchase order in. And that's a really dangerous place to be because we don't even know if we're on track. We don't even have a track to be on. We're just chasing the next check.
So how, I love that you said that. So how do you, so let's paint a scenario where the CEO is about to close the deal of the century, needs to have features built yesterday. The PM and the CTO have worked closely together in a very emotionally intelligent way.
I like that.
To help set the tone, the culture, and the priorities for the product. What does the PM do in that situation?
So there's two levels we're
Hey
operating
CTO, go
at
talk to the
here.
CEO.
This is the part where I strategically sip my tea to think about it. That's a hard question.
I will try a quail egg. Eric, you
You
ready?
need just a little bit of salt. Normally I would bring really good quality salt, but that's what you had in your drawer.
Really?
A little packet. Yeah.
We spent
Sort of a salt
hours
nerd.
selecting these salt sachets.
Yeah,
Hours.
I'm sure you did. It takes that long just to walk through Costco. So I'll say in that scenario that you've laid out, there's going to be things operating at different levels. If you've got a startup company that
Oh
almost...
my goodness, that's salty.
We could just go back to talking about quail eggs.
It tastes really interesting.
I mean, mostly they just taste like chicken eggs.
I don't think so. And I'm an aficionado.
Mm.
Can you take the chewing sounds out in the edit?
This is the part where everyone on the podcast gets to hear you chew.
Gross. I have a real issue with that, by the way. I'm one of those people who
I am too.
freaks out when I hear someone chew.
There's even a name
A
for
disease?
it, I think.
It's a disease.
Yeah, like misophonia.
And they say it happens to super creative people.
Oh, look at us go. Also people who want to murder everybody eating around them.
Oh my goodness. Even my beautiful son who's a Spider-Man fan, when I hear him chew, I want to kill it. I want to just suffocate something.
Something. That's good.
Not my son. Not my son.
We already established he's lost.
I love him.
That's good.
Jacques, if you listen to this 35 years from now, I really love you, boy. Okay.
So, fictional scenario.
Fictional scenario, which I think happens a lot, is protecting the product development roadmap, right?
Yeah. So there are cases in startups where if you're not going to make payroll that next month, you do what you need to do and you build what you need to do to get the product in. But you do it knowing, not to get the product in, to get the PO in. You do it knowing that that's the conscious decision that you're making. And when you have more flexibility, one of the hardest things a PM can do, and one of the most valuable things a PM can do, is stop the team from building the wrong thing. So that is one of the most difficult negotiations a PM will find herself in, and that is the short-term balance versus the long-term. I don't think there is an easy answer. It's easy for me to say, well, you build it, the CEO gets their way every time, or you don't build it, the market is more important. It's never that simple. There's a lot of factors. What is the percentage of overlap between what the customer is asking for and the direction you're taking the product anyway? What is the current utilization of the engineering team and the rest of the team that need to put the product out? It's a very important question I would ask. How does that impact the other things that are on the table? So there are times where you do have the ability to do something special for a customer and it doesn't derail the whole product. Not every detour is off a cliff. You got to write that one down.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's not great.
Oh, all right. I'll work up to it.
No, it's very, very good. Not every detour is off a cliff, my darling. Okay. So let me ask you this. When thinking about the CTOs of companies in the 5 million to, let's say in the $5 million range, i.e. traction, engagement, growth, and I'm talking about revenues. When as a CTO, because this comes up a lot in our conversations, is do I own product? Do I hire a VP of product, or do I hire a product manager? When do I know as a CTO that the thing I'm bumping my head against is not because I suck or my team sucks? It's because we don't have that product manager type in our org.
That's a difficult question, in part because product management is a lagging indicator. You can ship a product without a product manager, and most companies do when they start out. It's not until later that you find out if you were building the right product.
So so to just jump on that. So let's say, so would an indicator be, hey, we were all excited about these features and they just didn't work or didn't do what we thought it would happen? Is that an indicator?
Absolutely. So any product that has instrumentation in it will be able to, in some cases, see whether users have ever clicked on the thing that was built. That's a great indicator when it's much too late. In a lot of cases, you end up with sales problems where the product isn't meeting revenue targets, and it's very easy to blame the sales team that the engineers built this great product and the sales team just can't sell it. And in some cases, that's an indication that the product was built for a market that doesn't exist, or to solve a problem that people don't have, or to solve a problem that isn't important enough for people to spend money to solve it. And that's what trips people up, because we all have 1,000 problems that we can acknowledge our problems, but we're not actually willing to do the work or to spend the money or to take the time to use the product or service to solve that problem. So
when I am the CTO of the $5 million company, maybe 5 to 10, a way I can preempt that situation is when I'm start asking questions like, well, are we convinced, executive team, that this is what we need to spend our time on and our resources on? Maybe the answer to that question is, well, maybe it's time for us to bring in a product manager.
I think that's a great way to do it. And what also happens is that a company that's founded by people in an industry, they're often setting out to solve a problem that they had. They know the industry intimately. They might be their own target customer in some ways. But as soon as that executive team moves out of being the customer and into being the founder of the company, the information that they have begins to age. And it doesn't age like a beautiful wine. So there's a point at which...
Can you have some wine? Too early?
I'm going to finish my tea. We'll do an evening podcast series.
Yes.
It'll be a little like Drunk History,
Yes.
but it will be drunk product managers and CTOs.
Yes. .com. I'm sure that domain's available.
Not anymore by the time this publishes. So I think that, what were we talking about? Aging data.
Yes,
That's right.
Aging wine.
Aging experience. So I got distracted by wine. Well done. So the point at which we need to ask new questions, the point at which we need to understand if needs have changed since the last time we were in that industry is a good first step for somebody who's bringing in their first product manager.
And then I think that I've started a few companies and ideas, and I actually think that maybe as a technical founder, I could definitely have used product management insight, because I wasn't asking the questions I was supposed to ask. I was too excited about thinking that we were going to build something special. So even so the $0 startup that no money or pre-rev, they definitely can't afford to hire a product manager, but boy, can they use one.
In that case, you need a product manager on the founding team. And what we see a lot of are CFOs who are product managers without realizing it.
CFOs?
I'm sorry. No, I misspoke. I'm going to say that again. We can edit that.
That was almost a writer down, or?
No, I know. Look at that. You're poised.
The CTO.
The CTO or the CEO
yes.
is often a product manager without realizing it.
Yes.
And so it's very important in those organizations to acknowledge it, to make it explicit, as we were talking about before, that who is filling that role or what team is filling that role. And get some training, get some mentorship, reach out to other product managers. Hey, maybe go to Startup Week. There's a product management track this year.
In which city?
Here in San Diego.
That's exciting. So you're running that track.
I am.
And by the time this publishes, it would have been long gone, or it might be next week. Who knows?
That's okay, because there's also something in cities all around the world called ProductCamp.
ProductCamp. By the way, congratulations on an incredible startup week. You nailed it.
Yes.
Thousands and thousands of people.
The accolades were just
and that
overwhelming.
that thing you did,
that
right?
Thing,
that was
right.
huge.
Yeah.
So unexpected.
Boy. Social media blew up over that. Yeah.
That's forecasting. No, I think that's why I love talking to CTOs who are besotted with the products and could have been VPs of product. They bring a very interesting take, and not many of them are like that. Just like you have a graphic designer who also happens to be a coder. Those combinations are unusual but incredibly powerful. And I think CTOs with a solid product background are unicorns. And that's why we talk about, in our 7 CTOs forum, so much about the relationship with the product, i.e., what does the product management around that look like?
Yeah. The challenge there is, where are you going to spend your time? Because even with a really solid product background, there are a limited number of hours in the day. And one of the original...
22? 20, how many hours in a day? 20?
You rounding down?
Yeah. So what are you spending your time on?
So what are you spending your time on? And that's the key question for a CTO. Where does your attention need to be? And what are the issues that produce the most value for the time that you spend on it? And that might be spending all of your time with the engineering team. That might be spending all of your time in the boardroom with the executive team. And it might be spending time out meeting customers, hearing from the marketplace, talking to analysts or listening to analysts, and really understanding where the market is going. So you can do what Wayne Gretzky, Wayne Gretzky famously said. What made him a great hockey player was not that he skated to where the hockey puck was, but that he skated to where the hockey puck would be. ... You don't have to write that down because it's such an old chestnut.
No. Very, very good. The final couple questions to kind of dig into the people who are listening to this saying, who is Jessica Sweeney? First thing I want to ask you is, of this hub and spoke thing that you drew for us, which teams do you like working with the most?
I like working with the teams that work with me. So I really work hard to create a positive collaboration with all the teams that I need to work with. And when I can help people to understand what I'm trying to achieve and how it will help them do their job better, we can really make magic happen.
So generally the collaborative, open-minded, growth mindset teams.
Absolutely.
Are you willing to be wrong? Or do you feel super, super passionate that you are right all the time?
I am often wrong. I work hard to be wrong a couple of times before lunch.
And does that come generally from someone on the teams who are able then to convince, or not convince, but through collaboration, make you aware of some of the assumptions you've made, and then you rework those?
Absolutely. And people who are willing to have those conversations in a productive way are doing me a real favor. And I appreciate that. Calling out assumptions, testing hypotheses, getting new data, I think it's what a great product manager has to do.
And then can you there are two things about you that I find fascinating. Not only two, but one is, are you a mountain climber or a ocean sailor?
I am an ocean sailor. Do you think it was the fact that my shirt has SAIL written in big letters on it?
Is that an acronym for South Africa?
No, it's the word sail.
Oh, sail. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is from an event that happens every 5 years in Amsterdam. Sail is one of the biggest tall ship gatherings in the world.
And you're going to go sail this afternoon?
I am.
Racing.
I am going to race. I do 2 races on Wednesdays.
I naively said, can I come as well? Until I realized it was like a, how many foot racing yacht?
Well, I do an afternoon race that's on a 52-foot catch. And I do an evening race, the beer cans, which are slightly more competitive than the gentleman's race we have in the afternoon. And that's on a 34-foot Olsen.
And do you know what you're going to be doing this afternoon? Which role you'll be playing, or does it get dished out as you arrive?
So for the afternoon race, it gets dished out. For the evening race, I'm sometimes trimming jib, but I'm nursing a sore shoulder, so I'm on the foredeck.
I don't understand those words, but
But they sound impressive, which is very often how product managers work.
Do you have a favorite role on the sailboat?
It's all wonderful. Just being out on the water, and especially here in San Diego, it's so often just completely magical. The thing about racing sailboats in particular is that I am completely unplugged. So if you've got a cell phone in your hand when you're racing a boat, you are in for a bad time. You're doing it wrong. And so, I put my phone on airplane mode, and for a couple of hours, I've got a job to do with focus and clarity and a team, and we're all working towards the same outcome.
And you can see the outcome.
And it's a wonderful experience.
That
said, nobody ever minds being at the helm.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is I think I'd be really good at the guy or that stands and points, and then everybody does that.
There's a job called squirrel you'd really enjoy.
Squirrel?
Yeah.
Should I go Google that?
Yeah. You're underneath, and when the sails come down, you're pulling the sails down through the hatch to get them off the deck.
No, that doesn't sound right.
It's vitally
to me.
important.
It is
vitally important. Yeah.
But is it enjoyable?
For us.
And then
we need the sails off the deck.
The other thing that I love about you is you have traveled the planet.
There is more I haven't seen than I have, but I've tried to get out into the world. My mother said to me when I was looking at universities, don't live in California your whole life just because you've never lived anywhere else.
Words to live by. Have you seen the Grand Canyon?
I have.
Have you
Yeah.
seen Bryce Canyon,
No.
Mount Zion?
No.
I would highly
add to the
recommend
list.
and to everybody to go out there and check it out.
The
Utah.
most magical moment I had the last time I drove cross country, which my husband and I have done several times, we got to, by an accident, we got to Mount Rushmore as the sun was coming up before the national park opened. But we didn't want to stay and hang out. So we parked the car and we walked up into the park. I hope I didn't break any laws. This is all hypothetical. I did. And
Had you stopped, you would have.
Yes. And it was us and hundreds of deer and the sun rising over the faces of Mount Rushmore. And it was just a magical moment.
Is that when your husband proposed?
Oh, no, we've been married for a couple of decades now. That was a while back.
Jessica, I just love talking to you. I'm pretty sure the CTOs may want to reach out to you and ask you 101 questions. I'm definitely going to have you speak to us somehow. But thank you very much. Is there anything that you'd like to promote other than Startup Week? Where can people find you?
So ProductCamp San Diego is my current project, depending on when this airs. But the URL
we'll
will
make
always
sure it
work.
gets out before then.
ProductCamp San Diego.
And should CTOs attend, or should they send their product people or send their engineers? Who is it good for?
So anyone who is interested in how we decide what products to build, so product designers, product marketers, certainly CTOs, CEOs, and people with the title product manager. I think it's all good if we understand the fundamentals.
I love it. Thank you.
Thanks
for being.
This is a lot of fun.
Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Hi, thank you for listening to the CTO Studio. If you don't mind, take a quick second and please rate and review the show. It helps us a lot. Go to thectostudio.com for more information on what we're doing at 7 CTOs. We also have a video or two for you that could be a helpful resource for you as you're managing your company. So thank you for listening.